Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March 18th, 2025 meeting. Chairman Cush will not be here, so I'll be running the meeting. If we can have a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence, please. Thank you. So if you would do a roll call, please.
Mr. Agnesi.
Present.
Mr. Allen.
Present.
Mr. Anderson.
Present.
Mr. Hirsch.
Here.
Mr. Collegian. Mr. Macchio.
Here.
Mr. Mortimer.
Present.
Vice Chair Sadi.
I'm present. Thank you very much. On new business, we have item number C. There appears to be 4 different items. David, can these all be heard together?
If the city attorney has no objection.
Fine. Who's speaking on behalf of the city? Oh, Attorney Bertram. Good, thank you.
Good evening. John Bertram, City Attorney, City of Milford. Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are 3 easements requested. The city's requesting 824 referral from this board. This is a result of back in February of 2022, UI filed an application with the Connecticut Siting Council for issuance of a certificate of environmental compatibility and public need in connection with their plans to replace their 115 kV electric transmission facilities, which currently exist. If anybody's taken the Metro North, the bonnets over the railroad tracks, UI's got infrastructure on those aging bonnets, and UI is planning to remove them and replace them with its own infrastructure along the Metro North corridor. That was approved by the Siting Council in the summer of 2022. What's before you this evening are 3 easements, 4 total. You have at 0 Old Gate Lane, there's a temporary easement over 250 square foot portion. 0 Prospect, UI is seeking a permanent easement rights over a 0.29 acre portion for the purpose of a line blowout and permanent tree removal to protect its new infrastructure from tree limb damage. 0 River Street is seeking permanent easement rights over a 0.0001 acre portion of 0 River Street for the purpose of a line blowout and temporary easement rights over a 0.04 acre portion of the property to support its construction efforts for this new infrastructure. As you know, UI is a utility company, and they've offered the city a price. We've negotiated the price for the easements. We've confirmed the price, or reached an agreement on price through the assistance of the city's tax assessor, and that is the request for you tonight. Subject to your referral, it will be referred to the Board of Aldermen for the final 824 approval. If it's an affirmative vote, it'll be a simple majority vote at the Board of Aldermen. If it's a negative referral, it will be require 2/3. Obviously, the purview of the 824 is this consistent with the plan of conservation and development? Obviously, resiliency and ensuring power is delivered to our residents. I would suggest it is consistent. In one way or the other, this infrastructure is going in, just subject to pricing. On behalf of the city, we are comfortable with the price agreed upon with UI. I know that there's counsel here from UI as well as 2 UI representatives if you have any questions that I'm unable to answer.
Thank you, Attorney Bertram. Any questions by the members of the board? Mr. Anderson?
Evening, Attorney Bertram.
Oldgate Lane and Prospect, I could figure out the locations. I wasn't quite sure of the location of River Street and what it affected. If you can detail that for me, thank you.
Rather than guess, I'll have Attorney Jody Driscoll from Harris Beach.
Appreciate it.
Good evening, everybody. Jody Driscoll. I'm an attorney at Harris Beach, North Carolina, and I represent UI. So Zero River.
Excuse me, if you could just do us a favor, could you step up to the mic?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So Zero River Street is located not far from your train station. Better. So this is on the northern side of the train station. I wish I had a better, actually may have a better map, but that's not available to share with you. A diagonally shaded line would be the area for the temporary easement area. There's a very small sliver, which would be the permanent easement area. It's right at the bottom, right there where the little hand cursor is. It's a very small sliver right there. That would be the permanent easement rights. But this is located on the northbound side of Railroad Ave, is on the bottom there, and your train station would be south of that. Does that
So,
give you a
Brian, to
visual?
give you a frame of reference, it's the new parking lot, if you will, that the city acquired. So that's why you're asking. So the temporary easement is going to impact, I think, 7 spaces in that lot. No impact on the permanent.
That's exactly why I was asking.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
what I figured.
Thank you very much.
And I have an aerial photo if that would be helpful. I just need to locate it.
And this board will know well, it's almost directly across where the EV charging stations will go for the cars on the other side of that parking lot.
Got it. Thanks very much.
Do we have any other questions for members of the board? Mr. Hirsch?
Attorney Burcham, good evening.
Good evening.
Question. The utility easement at 0 Prospect Street, just because for Oldgate Lane as referenced as being temporary, just to be clear, the Prospect Street utility easement is intended to be permanent,
Correct.
and the 0 River Street easement, utility easement is intended to be permanent as well.
So Prospect Street is a permanent easement.
Yep.
For the purpose of the line blowout and permanent tree removal to protect the integrity of the infrastructure. River Street, there's 2 easements. There's a temporary easement showed by the shaded line. So that's just, sorry, I want to make sure the microphone is, that's just for the period of construction. The permanent easement does not impact any parking whatsoever, and it's
It's 0.0001 acres. So on this screen, you can't even see that, but it's literally a sliver right where the hand is on the presentation.
And then lastly, for the 0 Oldgate Lane, how long do you think that this easement will be temporary? For what duration of time, in other words?
So for Old Gate Lane, they're likely to start doing work in second quarter 2027. They actually will only probably be doing work for about 5 inconsecutive days, but it really all depends on the sequencing of the work. And so, they can't just spend 5 days doing it. They need to make sure the work on the prior sections is complete. So it's 5 inconsecutive days, should be completed within the third quarter of 2027, but it's really all subject to how construction progresses throughout the project.
Thank you very much. Does anybody see a need to keep this hearing open? Seeing none, I'll listen to any motion that's being made. Let's We'd have to do it in 3 separate parts. David, is that accurate for the record?
It never hurts.
Thank you.
Okay. I move to approve pursuant to CGS Section 824 to grant a temporary construction easement to the United Illuminating Company on land owned by the city of Milford at 0 Gate Lane.
Mr. Agnesi.
Do we have a second?
Oh, sorry.
You got a second for Mr. Agnesi? Any further discussion? No further discussion. Let's take a roll call, please.
Mr. Agnesi.
With the motion.
Mr. Allen.
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson.
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian. Mr. Macchio.
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer.
With the motion.
Vice Chair Sadi.
With the motion, so that one is passed. We now have 0 Prospect Street. I'll listen to a motion, please.
I move to approve pursuant to CGS Section 824 to grant a utility easement to United Illuminating Company on land owned by the city of Milford at 0 Prospect Street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
No, Mr. Alling, any further discussion on the motion? None. Seeing none, please take the roll call.
Mr. Agnesi.
With the motion.
Mr. Allen.
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson.
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Macchio.
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer.
With the motion.
Vice Chair Sadi.
With the motion. And last, we have 0 River Street. That first one, Prospect Street, passes, and I'd listen to a motion on 0 River Street.
I move to approve pursuant to CGS Section 824 to grant a utility easement to the United Illuminating Company on land owned by the city of Milford at 0 River Street.
Mr. Anderson, note second. Any further discussion on said motion? Seeing no need, if you might take a roll call, Susan, please.
Mr. Agnesi.
With the motion.
Mr. Allen.
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson.
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Macchio.
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer.
With the motion.
Vice Chair Sadi.
With the motion, thank you very much. Our next bit of business is a public hearing. This is to close by May 22nd of 2025, vote by June 6th of 2025. 161, 163 Cherry Street, a zone CDD1. Petition of Jennifer Close, perfect play date to establish an indoor play space at map 066, block 813, parcel 16, of which Milford Plaza Holdings DE LLC is the owner. Do we have somebody to speak on behalf of this particular petition or application? Thank you. What's important is you give us your name, address, keep your voice up, and if 2 of you are going to speak, make sure one is in front of the microphone, please. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Close. I reside at 99 Cherylland Drive in Milford. I'm here to present my business called Perfect Playdate, looking to open at 161, 163 Cherry Street, Milford. Should I just explain a little bit about the
That'd be
business?
wonderful. Thank you. You can brag too if you wish to.
Okay. So the business concept is that it's going to be in an indoor imaginative play space designed to be a welcoming community hub for families. Our thoughtfully created environment fosters creativity, social connection, and meaningful experiences for children, while providing also a comfortable space for parents and caregivers to connect and recharge. So personally, I'm a mom of 2, and I have found that in Milford, a majority of the indoor play spaces are geared towards 6 years old and over. We don't really have anything for younger children, so I would love to bring a location here where it's safe and clean for children, even crawlers, to engage in imaginative play and soft play, while parents can also sit and relax and enjoy the space as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? I have a couple of brief questions, if you could, please. The space that you're using right now, the space that you want to put into the project here, is it something that you own or leasing?
Leasing.
Okay. Is there an existing use prior to you taking it over? If you know, if you could explain it to us.
So I took 2 units. One side seemed to be what was an eyelash studio, and one seems to be vacant for a very long time.
And have you had to do construction work inside of it to get to where you need to make this application?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Are there any questions besides myself for the applicant? Mr. Psalkos, if you could explain to us the administrative summary, and then specifically appears that we have the police department pending, if you would address that also in your comments. Thank you.
The applicant is proposing to combine 2 existing spaces in the shopping plaza at 163 Cherry Street into an indoor children's play space. The combined space is approximately 4,700 square feet. This comes before the board because the use is a special permit and falls under section 3.16.2.12. No exterior changes to the site are proposed. The use is internal to the existing building. Since there are no changes to the site, the board can recommend a conditioned approval pending the police. You can also approve it without that. This is an existing space in an existing shopping center. We would consider this a tenant fit-out if it weren't for the fact it's a special permit use. So I leave that to you to decide.
Okay, thank you. Any questions after hearing the administrative summary form? It appears to be none. I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson.
Not a question, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to state that there's new ownership of the shopping center. They recently repaved the lot. This will be, this proposal is a terrific use of the existing space, and it would be most welcome in Milford.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Anybody have an objection to closing the public hearing tonight? Again, seeing none.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
you should open it up to the public
That's
for
right,
comment.
we should. Anybody in the public wishes to speak before we close this? That's right. I see there are people here, but I don't think they're going to be speaking on this issue. Okay, nobody wants to speak on this issue. We've now had the public hearing. We had the applicant speak. I will ask that this be closed. That being said, I'll listen to a motion, please.
I move to approve, as presented, the petition of Jennifer Close, Perfect Play Date, to establish an indoor play space at map 66, block 813, parcel 16, of which Milford Plaza Holdings, DE LLC is the owner.
Thank you for the extra noise. Is there a second? Anybody feels want to follow up on? Mr. Anderson, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion? I'm sorry, any further discussion on the motion? Nothing being noted. If you could take the roll call, please.
Mr. Agnesi.
With the motion.
Mr. Allen.
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson.
With the motion,
Mr. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Macchio.
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer.
With the motion.
Vice Chair Sadi.
With the motion, and good luck to you, and thank you very much for your presentation. And I echo the comments made by Councilman, Mr. Anderson. So we are now back, letter E, old business, CDD2 regulations. Discussion. One thing that came out, we did have a hearing, I believe it was 2 weeks ago now. We also had a regulation subcommittee hearing, and for us to be able to get to a public hearing, Mr. Psalkos, could you just kind of explain that to the board, what we need to do to get to the next stage if we're going to do a public hearing?
So the board needs to have some sort of a consensus about what you'd like to send for review. So the next step in the process is actually two things. One, settle on language. I won't call it final language because that language could change after a public hearing, but language that you find acceptable for us to circulate to the councils of government and the state. So when we get their comments back, we can schedule a public hearing to discuss the regulation as it was sent. If, during that process of having the public hearings and discussions, the board, wants to change the language, you can. So that's the process. So based on comments made at the last meeting, I did change the draft, which I distributed to you, unfortunately, earlier today. I would have liked to have gotten it to you sooner, but I just couldn't. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. So that would be, I think, a good start for a discussion if you were inclined to do so.
If you just give me 1 second, I had no access whatsoever to the internet today. And David, when was this sent, apparently?
It was sent this afternoon. I'm going to say around 1:30.
Let's try it this way. Do the board members have that changes? I mean, I've not seen it. Doesn't mean we can't go forward on this, but do we need an ability to? Okay, I found something from David 4 hours ago. Why don't we all just take a minute? I know most of us have internet access and tabs. Let's just see what Dave was talking about on his most recent email.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to investigate Mr. Mortimer's microphone and see what's going on.
Okay.
Testing.
Saw what you did. Testing. All right.
Thank you, David. It seems to me, at least I have the draft that we received 2 weeks ago, and that is in printed form. It seems to me that we could probably go through some things that we've already agreed to, and then we have to deal with what has been discussed by David this afternoon. Does everybody have the 3/4/25 draft, or they have access to get to it?
Just to let you know, that's several drafts ago. That were the draft that was sent to you for review is dated 3/18/25.
That was the one that was for tonight.
That was
Yeah,
one
but-
sent today.
The one you sent, but you have one, we had 2 weeks ago we had.
Right, that was the one from that time, yes.
Okay, is there a separate?
I have a printout here, Bob. This is the one right here.
Okay, so yeah, so we all have the 3/18/25 draft. And I have a paper document that has 3/4/25 on it, but I think that we could, if it's okay with the members of the board, we go through the sections that I think we've pretty much all agreed on. And then I think that, Mr. Hirsch, you have a different thought on what we should do?
You made a statement. I don't think we had universal agreement. That's all I'm saying. I think we had a nice discussion about certain parameters, but I don't think we had a universal agreement.
Oh, I mean, I never meant to say the whole thing, but that there are things that we have agreement on, and then there's others that we don't have to, that we're going to have to discuss tonight. I was going to try to highlight what I thought would be the ones that would not require further discussion, and if anybody says that we need that further discussion, we go from there. But I'm going from a document that starts off at 317.1, and there's a purpose above it. And the next thing that we have is a single or two-family dwellings, and I believe that my memory is that we agreed on the changes that are mentioned in the 3/18/25, and that's 317.1. And there was a discussion, we were thinking about minimum one unit in accordance with CGS 830, but we decided not to use that one. Is that the memory of the others? Go ahead, Mr. Hirsch.
Mr. Chair, were you asking a question?
Yes. On 317.11, so that starts off singular family two dwelling units. What is proposed by Mr. Sulkus this afternoon has three subs, 1, 2, and 3, but it ends in tandem parking to accommodate new units is prohibited. We did have a discussion on March 4th of 2025 that there might have been a discussion of a maximum of one unit added in accordance 317.11 and also a component of CGS 830G, and I believe that we agreed not to have that in there.
I believe that's what we agreed, not to have that sentence in there.
Yeah. And then, so could we agree that 317.11 subparagraph A, as proposed by Mr. Sulkus today, is the appropriate document that should go if we refer this to the appropriate authorities?
I agree with it.
I'm good with the new document. Yes.
Okay, and then we have 317.12, which deals with stores for sale of goods. I don't believe we have any discussion 2 weeks ago or even in regulation subcommittee, so unless somebody has an objection to that language, we'll just have that as part of what would be going to the appropriate regional council and local towns and the like.
Mr. Chair, are you talking about the special uses at 3.17.2? Are you referring to that section?
It's 3.1711, and it starts off as permitted uses. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Mr. Chair, there might be some confusion. The only new language in here is what's in yellow. So 317.1.2, that's what exists currently. So that wasn't up for a change.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just asking that I think we really should be going through point by point unless there's a different way you feel we should approach it. Mr. Hirsch is seeming to say we should go through point by point. And again, most of this, in my notes, we didn't have any real discussion. It was not really up to a problem. I'm just saying we go through these. It's about 6 to 8 pages, and we'll go through the ones that need to have discussion. But we're at 31712, stores for sale of goods. Anybody need to have that addressed any further? Probably the best way to put it that way.
I have no problem with 31712.
Okay. 31713, food or beverage service establishments. Anybody need that to be changed at all? Looked at. 31714, offices for business, financial, professional. Again, that appeared to be not something that we needed to have a further discussion on. Everybody agree on that? 17.5, which is dry cleaning and dyeing. These are now, again, nothing that we appeared in my memory of the regulation subcommittee, which is not as important as what we discussed 2 weeks ago. 31715, we all agree that should go as it's typed. Apparently so, okay. 31716, printing or publishing establishments. Again, that should go as it's exactly typed. And again, assuming no further need to question it or objection, we'll go through it next. 31717, off-street parking garages or lots. 31718, mixed-use buildings contain two or more permitted uses. So now we're into 317.9, which was the language being used here is mixed-use building containing dwelling units as one other permitted use. And that would be the last one. Is that, again, sufficient for everybody to go?
Yep.
Okay. We did get into, in the March 4th, and it's noted as new here, 317.1.10, mixed-use and/or residential buildings meeting the following conditions. My memory and the notes of our discussion back on March 4th was that we allowed for mixed-use and/or multi-family residential buildings to meet the following conditions. And the new construction, which is a subparagraph A with a several number of bullet points, goes all the way down to no residential units, uses to be located on the first floor. Has everybody seen that?
Mr. Chair, can you please read the first clause of what you're referring to?
Okay. I'm reading out of what was proposed by Mr. Sulkus today. 317.110, it says mixed use and/or multifamily residential buildings meeting the following conditions. And subparagraph A, new construction of multifamily residential buildings, then has a series of bullet points that go down. Do we all have those in our view? Does that answer your question, Mr. Hurst? Thank you. We then get down to no residential uses to be located on the first floor. It appears that we had an agreement on March 4th regarding that particular area of the proposed regulations. And then we get to, it's not a separate bullet point, but it says housing set-aside density bonus for new construction of mixed-use and/or multifamily residential, and then it has a development. And where I believe we did have, and we should have discussion now, is the language that said that the affordable housing to the amount of, and what is in this document is 15%. We had a further discussion 2 weeks ago, and my number was not 15%, it was 20%. So I think it's about time we have a discussion and we have to go through, again, my position is we should have 20%. I understand Mr. Sulkus's comments to us about whether it's going to make a difference for the developers and those that wish to develop. And I related to the board 2 weeks ago, and I'll relate it again. That regional council has had this come up in different towns across the last several months, and it appears that most are 20% as the lowest. Some are saying 20% or more, and I did relate that there was a project in the town of Fairfield that didn't set a specific percentage, but there was one that had 30% of them. So that is it's in red in the document that was provided to us by Mr. Sulkus. And at this point, I'm suggesting that we have a discussion about whether 15% is what we should send, or 20%, or a different figure. And I'll be willing to listen to anything anybody has to say.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Sulkus.
It should be noted that those regulations from the Council of Governments, for the most part, were not 20% for a zone like our zone, being a full zone. Hamden's, which you pointed to, was for a specific parcel, what they call a PDD, which would be analogous to what you did on Wheeler's Farms Road, and only covered a 4.06 parcel in town, a very specific project. Wallingford was very similar, and I believe Southington had a floating zone, which again was very much like Wheeler's Farms. I don't believe any of the towns that were cited from the Council of Governments had a regulation of 20% that was for an entire zone.
And we can differ on that, but my position is that we want to be in the front of this. But I'm willing to listen to other members of the board talk. Mr. Hirsch? Mr. Anderson first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question of Mr. Sulkus. The 15% is specified throughout, but I'm wondering, and I was persuaded by Bob's, the chair's language of the last meeting on this subject. I'm wondering, do we have to have an exact percentage, or can we state that minimum of 15%? It's possible, right?
You can have any language you want.
There you go.
So yeah, I mean, a minimum, and this is where we got into when we had the discussion about the challenges of a sliding scale, because 15% of 10 units is much different than 15% of 30 units. So setting a minimum 15%, and then if they are willing to give more, then that would be great.
So, Mr. Chair, I want to open that door, as opposed to coming up with an exact percentage. Have a minimum percentage so that we can strive so that there are projects that would be at 20%, 25%, 30%, what have you. That is the ultimate goal, it seems to me.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Hirsch?
Mr. Chair, as was discussed at our meeting 2 weeks ago, Mr. Chairman Quish pointed out that we have not built in this town a condo complex, owner-occupied condo complex, in quite some time in this town. When I look at 830G, I think we operate as a board under the assumption that 830G applies only to rentals. But that's not true. If you look at the text of the statute, it talks about under 830G B2B, or A I should say, such regulations may include additional criteria for preparing an affordability plan and shall include a formula for determining rent levels and sale prices. So I think whatever we do here as a board with respect to this CDD2 corridor or other corridors in this town, we need to take into consideration we need more owner-occupied projects, especially for the elderly population of our town who can't downsize. Many individuals in this town have reported to me their difficulty in downsizing from the homes that they currently reside in. This would be an opportunity to start the process of allowing individuals in our town to remain here well into the later stages of their life. So whatever we decide to do, I think, needs to have some type of an owner-occupied component to it.
If I can just respond and ask a question. Commissioner Hirsch, excellent thoughts, good comments. Do you think that that your thoughts and comments apply to this one section, or should be something we should add in a different section?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Dave.
He asked me a question. That's a good.
Then I will let,
Okay.
I'll tell you, let David give his thoughts, and I'll give you my thought. I want to hear what he has to say. He knows more about this than I do.
Thank you.
just to let you know, we do have affordable ownership housing in town. A developer did develop housing. I believe I think it might be Forest Glen that has an affordability component. The Planning and Zoning Board doesn't have the power to dictate through zoning regulations the type of ownership for any property. The goal is admirable, but you can't dictate, you can't regulate how an owner, who the owner is, what form the ownership is of a property. You're looking at its form factor and how it relates to the land and what the use is. So the goal is admirable. If you wanted to, a developer is going to develop whatever obviously makes the most sense, and quite frankly, whatever they can make the most profit with. So if they can develop townhouses through our regulations that can then be sold for a better profit than renting them, they're going to do it. But that's a market determination, and we can't dictate the market. We can look at the regulations to make it easier to construct the form factor that you're looking for. If you're looking for smaller houses on smaller lots or multiple houses on lots, that's something that you can do.
So I have an idea.
Okay, thank you.
What if you made the language, I'm just going to throw it out. Under housing set-aside density bonus, you do a development that provides affordable housing as defined by Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G in the amount of 15% of the proposed rental units. And then another section that says proposed owner-occupied units. So you just put those words in the language, owner-occupied versus rental, to distinguish between the two concepts.
But if the statute gives the developer the ability to do one or the other, are you just saying that we would mimic the same language and put in 15% of rentals and 15% of owner-occupied? It doesn't make a difference from the developer's standpoint.
Well, you can change the percentages to incentivize, but building owner-occupied
But you don't have the ability to do that. You can't distinguish. The Planning and Zoning Board's mission by statute is to regulate the kind of land use, not the kind of ownership. You cannot regulate the ownership of property. You cannot say, you can have it if you rent it, you can have it if you buy it. You can't do that.
John Agnese, I think you had your hand up at one point. I'm sorry.
Yes, I did, thank you.
John Agnese, did you have? John, did you have your hand up? Okay.
Okay, number one, I want to back up Mr. Anderson's suggestion of minimum of 15%. I like that. Also, I want to note on this section, maximum building height of 60 feet seems a bit high for the area. Is this on Bridgeport Avenue, Naugatuck Avenue? Does this pertain to a certain area or the entire district?
Okay, give me 2 seconds. Let's see. Yeah, this is for the new construction of just a multifamily residential building. And for this particular section, it doesn't distinguish between Bridgeport Avenue and Naugatuck Avenue.
So I would say in some areas 60 feet might be okay, but I think for the entire area that might be a bit overwhelming.
So just so I know how to phrase something new, if 60 feet is okay, do you think that's okay on on the Bridgeport Avenue side? Do you think that's okay on the Naugatuck side? Do you think it's not okay in either? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Personally, I would say Bridgeport Ave, Boston Post Road, those areas would be the proper location of the larger buildings, but Naugatuck Avenue, Devon Center, that part of the center, not so much.
Okay. Okay. So for a bonus for that type of use on Naugatuck Avenue, the current regulation has 40 feet. So would 50 feet be better? And keep in mind, yeah, and also keep in mind for the 60 feet or even the 50 feet, whatever the ultimate number is, we're also calling out for minimum setbacks for that kind of development, which we don't have, you know, as of right development project. So they are set back 20 feet from the sides and rear lot lines of any abutting residential zone to sort of mitigate that height, if that makes a difference.
Yeah, I do see that. I think that still be proper in the main drags, Bridgeport Ave, Post Road.
Okay, so
That's my opinion.
So you think 50 feet is better on Naugatuck? Okay. Do other people agree?
I think to get us to the circulation, yes. Mr. Agnese, would you?
Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you want to say something else?
Not a problem. Firstly, I concur with Mr. Mortimer. I think we'd best stick to 50 feet. In fact, I would go 50 feet across the entire zone personally. I believe Mr. Hirsch made some excellent points regarding what can we do to promote owner-occupied housing. Now, I understand, and it's well taken, Mr. Sulkis' point that we can't specifically mandate any type of ownership under our powers, but surely we must have some ability to provide some kind of carrot that is going to promote that sort of development to a developer. Now, I've said this in the past, but I think it would be important to have a developer in front of us to basically tell us what could those carrots be that could encourage that kind of development. We're kind of shooting from the hip here, so I'd really like to have something definitive before we move all the way with this and circulate it.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, I think you had your hand up at some point.
Mr. Sadi?
We'll come back to you, Joe.
Just to respond to that, because it's part of my thinking about how to approach this, is that's where the city comes in, not necessarily this board. But the city needs to be taking a leadership role to encourage developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, look at housing units that could be sold as well as rentals. Look at city-owned properties and whether they can be utilized in the mix as an incentive for the development. And so, in thinking of what's along Naugatuck Avenue or Bridgeport Avenue, I'd be interested in knowing whether the city, to do the deeper dive, whether the city has an interest in any of those properties, number one. Number two, who the larger owners are. If we're going to be looking at it thoroughly, we really should be that detailed about it. Who are some of the larger owners that can be influenced to try to achieve the goals that we're looking for? Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hirschman, just get to Mr. Alling.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I just want to point out that what some board members have alluded to, that there was a time when all these condos were being built and then we've kind of moved away from that. That is part of a national trend that has to do with basically demand. The kinds of housing that people want to buy or rent, and the kinds of housing that developers are interested in making. So I don't know that that's something that we really, even if we had regulations to try to incentivize, if that's something that we could really change.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hirsch.
Two comments. Mr. Alling was focusing on demand, but I'm focusing on, and I think we're focusing on supply. Second, what Mr. Agnese was referring to was he liked what I was saying. But what I don't want is, I don't want developers coming in and building condos that people can't afford. So when you have the supply-demand curve and you're matching supply, demand, and price, there has to be built, whatever's being built has to be the people in the town, whether you're new to town, whether you live here for a while, or whether you're downsizing, can afford to live in it. And so we do need some component of affordability so people can live in the town they want to live in, and the town they've lived in their whole life. That's the policy that's driving this, in my opinion.
Thank you. So we've got a good discussion. I'd like to let us go back to something that we talked about and we had input from individuals. It's found in 3 different spots in the proposed regulations. It is a requirement or providing for affordable housing. I had offered 20%. There was a number of 15% in the document that came today. And Mr. Anderson indicated that the language should be minimum of 15%, right, Brian? Yes. You know, can we have a quick discussion on that? Ultimately, we have to get this to a public hearing, John, and Agnese, and that's where we want to start with something. We'll be able to listen to all the people that want to be heard, and we make our final decisions. I agree with that, and I know that people want to know about condos and development. But let's talk about that for a minute. I am looking at 20%. I'm not against the minimum language of minimum 15%. Can we come to agreement on that at this point? Not everybody has spoken on that particular issue, but, because if we don't come to an agreement, we're just passing it down to the next meeting because we can't circulate until we get the written document in front of them. Brian or Etan, I'm sorry, I have my glasses off.
I don't think you can come to agreement with the percentage until you know what you want to build or regulate there, to zone for there. You can't go with the percentage and then all of a sudden then say, well, we want to have this here. We're trying to do an incentive process. The percentage would be incentivizing something else. You can't start at the end and then go to the beginning. That's my belief in that. We got to figure out what we want to do in the zone first, which is condos, rentals, whatever it is, and then incentivize towards that.
And again, all good points, but if this language is in there, would you be opposing it going to Mr. Slocus? I'm drawing a blank on the word.
Circulation.
Circulation. That's what left my head. That's what it was. So circulation. I think that eventually we have to get to, and your points are well taken, and we'll discuss that fully, but is there anybody that has a serious concern that we should not use any language, should not, as Mark has pointed out, should we do that, or should we go with what Brian has indicated, a minimum of 15%, and we can sort out after the public hearing what we want to do? I'd just like to listen to comments by the members of the board. Go ahead, Mr.
I would just say that I like the minimum of 15% because if we demand 20, it's just a short jump to 30, which is 830G, and they could ignore, everything else that we do here as far as zoning. So to me, it's a little too close to the 830G 30%. So if we go with the minimum of 15, if they want to go to 20 or 25, that's great, but at least at 15, that's the carrot, and we still have some control. So in my opinion, that's why I prefer that one.
Anybody else? Etan?
The truth is, the carrot are the tax incentives. That's what drives development, is tax incentives. So we are not a taxing authority here as a planning and zoning board. We're involved with the use. That's, in my opinion, has to come from the mayor's office and the board of aldermen. There's only so many carrots we can use, in my opinion. I think Brian's right about the minimum 15%. I wish it was higher, Personally, I'd like it to be 25%, but I don't think that's going to work with the way the board's currently constituted. So to hedge it, I would go with Brian at minimum 15%, although I'd prefer more.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Selkis.
just for, making peace, I agree with Eitan. That's a tool. Tax incentives are a tool that the town could use, and that is where, through tax incentives, the city could dictate forms of ownership. But that's a separate issue than what we can do here under our zoning regulations.
And the other thing that I'm thinking about is that there are 7 of the 10 members of the board here. And traditionally, we try to do an agreement and everything. So the first thing that I have, as I'm thinking this through, should we have all 7 members that are here, plus the additional 3, to be part of the discussion before we formulate what is going to be circulated? And let's talk about that first and just kind of give us an idea. If we should have all 10 here, then we can cut some of this discussion out. We'll wait till the next meeting. Go ahead, Eitan.
We may not have all 10 here until July. We're 7. We have more than 50% of the boards here. If someone gets sick next meeting, meetings get canceled, things happen. We're here. Let's do it now.
Anybody have John Agnes? Go ahead.
I would wait for the additional board members.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts on this issue?
If it helps, to whatever degree, I will not be available the next meeting. I will be away. So if you don't do something tonight, it'll probably be kicked over to the meeting on the 15th of April.
So let's kind of do an informal. Brian,
Doesn't this have to come out of the subcommittee?
it's already on the subcommittee. That's why we're here.
Well, we didn't vote for anything now to bring it out of the subcommittee. I thought we were just bringing it up to the board just to see what we could discuss again in the subcommittee.
If you
Why do
guys-
we have a subcommittee if we're just going to just do whatever we want?
I agree. Go ahead, David. Explain to us, please.
So the chairman felt that this was such an important topic that limiting the discussion to the 4 or 5 members of the subcommittee wasn't fair to the rest of the board, since he...
So then we should have the full board, if that's the decision, should have the full board here.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I agree with Mark.
Yeah.
We can always agree and disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. And Mark's voice is always heard, and it's an important voice.
It is. I don't mean to make light, but
That wasn't making light. You're giving an appropriate assessment of things going on. So we know that we have to come up with the written language before it can be circulated. And I agree, Mark, that there was no specific vote that was taken to bring it out of committee. I've been on the regulation subcommittee for almost my whole term here. I don't recall whether we've done it every single time that we vote to come out. Sometimes we do, sometimes it's simple. But more importantly, points are well taken. Is there anybody that would object to continuing this to the next meeting, which, whatever it's going to be? Anybody have an objection to that? So I see all members. Eitan? Eitan's objected.
I object.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I also would object.
Okay. So we got 2.
I'm prepared to vote.
Vote tonight?
That goes against everything what the other chairman just said then. If he wants the whole board here to discuss and then they're not here, and then now you just want to push it through. We didn't even vote it out of the subcommittee. The whole point of the subcommittee is to discuss what you want to do, bring it out of the subcommittee, then really understand what you guys want to do on the full board. That's the whole point of a subcommittee, or else why even have a subcommittee? It's a waste of time to go on Zoom every other Wednesday.
In fairness, everyone was invited to the subcommittee meeting.
Okay, still not voted out of the subcommittee though. There's procedures.
This board has the power to vote on and agree on regulation changes, and that's just what we can do.
It sounds like you want to push something through when not everybody's here, because there's procedures. Just like I've heard discussion today about procedures outside of this for a federal level, and yet we're going to disregard procedures and push through on other things on here.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but it could be a long time before we have all 10 members.
Okay, well then that's the whole point, is that you have the whole board that represents every district, and their constituents can come up to them, and then they can express what they're saying in their district.
I don't think it's necessary for us to wait that long, and I think...
You don't think it's necessary to wait that long? Why not?
At this point, every board member has had an opportunity to comment on this. So
They're not here, but we brought it out. We didn't even vote it out as a subcommittee, and now we're pushing it through, and just because you think that we should do that isn't a really good reason to do it.
Okay.
No,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, through you, the way that I view it is this has been worked on. We're continuing to work on it this evening, and it's due to go to public hearing. There are revisions, more than likely, that will result from the public hearing. So it is not by any means a final product. Like, for example, I'll just say for the record, I'd like to put this on the record so that those who are here are aware of this. I expressed to Mr. Sulkus privately concerns about greenery, the amount of green space that's available, resulting from a project such as this, or rather regulation changes. So within, just to put on the record, within 3.17.1.10, new construction of multifamily residential buildings, it says 100 square feet of outdoor area multiplied by the number of units shall be provided for usable open space with landscaping. This outdoor area shall not be located in a front yard. This area is exclusive of any required buffers, setbacks, sidewalks, or parking areas. Just want that to be out there so that we're thinking about creating green space as well as thinking about the density of the units themselves.
The question is procedure, not really at the moment what's in the writing. I mean, yes, I don't disagree with anyone that's spoke yet today, but it's a procedural issue now that we're not following the board's procedure.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Sulkus.
if it helps, the subcommittee can have up to 5 members. The subcommittee can act on any item before them with just 2 members present. So the argument that a 10-member board needs all 10 members to act doesn't hold any weight or reason.
The procedure is still to vote it out of the subcommittee, so you're
Please-
still
please-
out of,
please
you're
don't
not in
cut
the,
off Mr.
you're still
Sulkus.
not in the subcommittee. You're
Please-
still not in the procedural.
The chairman took it out of the subcommittee because he's the chairman and can, and brought it to the full board to have this discussion, which the board is acting as the subcommittee. Keep in mind, the board is not required to have a subcommittee, period. We have that committee because the chairman decided he would like to have that committee. You don't need it, it's not required. Every regulation that this board can come up with and change can be done by the full board, whether there's 10 members present or 6 members, which is the minimum needed for this board to conduct business. Just keep that in mind. Ultimately, whatever it is you want to do, that's between you guys, but those are the facts.
Thank you, and again, we'll keep the discussion down to an appropriate level. We all have good points and good thoughts. We are at the one point that I talked about that's found in 3 places, whether we deal with the language which is proposed of 15% or minimum 50%. Somebody wants to make a motion regarding that, I suggest that is appropriate to do. This board is here, we're just trying to get a document in front of those particular people that have to be part of the circulation. So if we want to have a motion regarding that particular issue, the language of 15% or minimum of 15%. That's what we'd be talking about. Motion, any way they want to make that. We have to get by that part of the discussion we've been having to get to the next one. Mr. Hirsch?
I wish to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The motion, please.
I will second.
Would you give us what the motion is first?
Can I give you the language?
Yes, please.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You're just pushing everything through. So that's an exact example of what I'm saying here. I really want you guys to understand that this is on the record, that you don't even know the motion and you're seconding it because you're pushing everything through.
Thank you. If we can just have the wording of the motion, please, Mr. Hirsch.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to amend the regulations in a manner such as for housing set-aside density bonus for new construction of mixed-use and/or multifamily residential, that a development that provides affordable housing as defined by Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G in an amount of at minimum 15% of the proposed units at 60% and 80% of the area median income in a 50-50 split shall be given the additional incentives: A, maximum building height of 50 feet, and B, maximum building coverage of 80%.
I will second that.
Mr. Mortimer, second. Is there any further discussion on that particular motion?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, David.
Just a question, and my question is based on a comment from earlier this evening, where at that time there was a discussion of 60 feet on Bridgeport Avenue and 50 feet on Naugatuck Avenue. I don't know if that's something you want to consider in the motion or not.
50 feet for the entire CDD2 zone.
So that's an amendment to the earlier motion. Is there a second to the amendment? Mr. Anderson, thank you. Any further discussion on?
Don't you have to vote on the first motion, and then the two people who did that need to then, see, there's another procedural thing. You have to then say, I want to amend the motion?
That was what happened, and there was an amendment?
No, I didn't see the second person that seconded it to say that I would like to amend my second.
The person that you didn't see was Mr. Anderson.
Nothing was amended. Mr.
You just said that something was amended.
No, Mr. Hirsch. No, I suggested, based on I asked a question based on a comment that was made earlier that seemed to want to split those heights, but that's not the motion that Mr. Hirsch made. He wants it to be one height. He didn't amend his motion.
That's right, and I didn't second because I had brought up the fact of the
Thank you.
Bridgeport Avenue, and I would like to carve out for Bridgeport Avenue.
There's a motion by Mr. Hirsch, which is the language, which basically is minimum 15%, and he went through that. Maximum building coverage of 80%. So that's where we are. Any further discussion on that?
I would just like to say, I would like a carve out for Bridgeport Avenue for the 55 feet, 60, but 60 feet as it's written. We'll keep it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hirsch.
Yeah, I think Mr. Agnese was correct about the 50 feet. One of the other issues is if you start going higher, you open the door to other areas in Milford where you're going to start getting up to 70, 80, 90 feet. So once you open up that incentive or whatever you want to call it, you can't go back. So 50 feet for the entire CD2 zone to prevent future height issues in this city.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Salkis.
Just for the board's own knowledge, you need to know that two zones allow 12 stories or 120 feet, among them the mall, and that zone is the SCD zone. So the barn door to height was opened more than 20 years ago.
Thank you very much for the assessment. As I understand where we are at this point, Commissioner Hirsch made a motion that involved the housing set-aside, which we found in $317,110. And the motion, as I understand it, was the important language is that the 830G in the amount of minimum of 50% of the proposed unit, and I don't believe that there was, this was in your motion, Mr. Hirsch, was any discussion about feet, 60 feet, and the maximum building coverage of 80%, I do remember. So I can go back to Susan. Would you just, if you have the ability to repeat what the motion was by Commissioner Hirsch?
Vice Chair, I don't have all of the language because it was a long run-on. But he did say that he wanted to amend the regulations in a manner such as housing set-aside density bonus would be an amount of 15% minimum, and of the 60 and 80% that the 830G requirements have. And then he said a max height of 50 feet, maximum coverage of 80%.
Thank you. So that's the motion's before. It's been seconded. We're having a discussion on that. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Mr. Allen?
I'm going to vote against the motion because I think that along Bridgeport Ave, 60 feet should be the maximum height.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussions? Then we'll take a vote. If you would, the roll call, please.
Mr. Chair, he has
Yes.
a comment, I have a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a point of order. So what we are voting on is an adjustment to the language that we are going to be voting on after, correct?
I'm not sure I understand you, John.
So we're just amending this language, correct? And then that's...
This part, that's this
part of the
discussion,
language.
yes.
And then, once we're done with that vote, then we would go and do a separate vote for distribution, correct?
If we get through the rest of the document, yes.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and my comment is, I think an 80% building coverage is excessive personally, but I think we're right there with the 50 feet height, so I think that outweighs it.
Okay, thank you. If we could take a roll call, please.
Mr. Agnese,
With the motion.
Mr. Allen,
Against the motion.
Mr. Anderson,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Machio,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
I'm against the motion.
Vice Chair Sadi.
With the motion.
I think you had three who were against the motion, and the rest were for the motion.
I had two against the motion and four for the motion.
You had two against the motion? Okay.
Yeah.
The motion passes then. so-
Motion passes.
Yes.
Now we
You
get
have to
down
excuse
to,
me. You have to excuse me. I have to go to work. But have a better meeting, I guess.
thank you.
Guess you guys are going to applaud.
Okay, so at this point, we're going through the other portions of the document, and there's a subsection that is entitled B, Expansion of Existing Commercial Buildings. And my memory and my notes would indicate that there was discussion on March 4th regarding this, and we go down to certain bullet points, and there's one that talks about parking. It'll be the last bullet point. Those appear to be what we all agreed at a previous meeting or had no objection to. Does that seem fair to the remaining members of the board?
It does. I will note that, I didn't notice this before, but on the housing set-aside paragraph for
You're talking about
Bridgeport
this
Ave.
Are you talking about B? Yeah, we haven't gotten to that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
No, no.
jumping the gun
We're
here.
getting there. No, we get the parking.
Yeah, okay.
I think we all agree that's there. And then this housing set-aside density bonus for the existing commercial buildings. This is on the Bridgeport Avenue side.
Bridgeport Ave, yes.
This, again, we dealt with by way of motion by Commissioner Hirsch. And we have the similar language. I'm just verifying that I note for this, there's two differences. One is the 15% is in there, and the question is, do we have it similar to the earlier language? But also here on Bridgeport Avenue, we have a maximum building height of 65 feet, David. If you could just explain that, because that's different than what I have for March 4th, and I just don't have a memory where we got there.
For the same reason I mentioned earlier, because this would be along Bridgeport Avenue, Route 1, so the thinking would be higher. Obviously, based on the earlier vote that you took, being this is a set-aside density bonus for the same purpose, I would suggest, I would suggest it be lowered to the 50 feet if you wanted to match. The difference here, though, is this would be adding units to existing commercial buildings that are on Route 1. You know, they're typically not more than 3 stories tall, so a lot of them are 1 story. So the change in the height, you know, again, is up to you.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing I just want to point out, which I don't know if you want to revisit tonight or at another point, but back in the paragraph that you just changed under A, lowering the height, one of the things that's in that paragraph was because of the height, there were minimum building setbacks from the side and rear lot lines of 20 feet. I don't know if you believe that should still be in existence now that the height is brought down to within 10 feet of what the regulation currently allows.
And I appreciate the thought and comment, but very able commissioner had a chance to make the motion and didn't touch those, so I assume that he knew exactly what he was doing. We now get to if we could, get down to sub B, and that is, again, the point of 65 feet, David, was, as I thought I heard you say, is because it's for commercial buildings on the first floor in theory,
Right.
and then they're going to build up.
Right.
And then the parking, is this, the parking 5.1, is that going to make a difference to how we deal with anything in there?
Well, the board had expressed concern that any additional, any housing that's created along Route 1 Bridgeport Avenue should account for any parking for, you know, each of those new dwelling units created should have parking. So that is there to say that yes, you know, if you're going to build these units, you need to park them in accordance with Section 5.1.
So what I do know, and again, it just might be that the bullet point of parking was added. If you take a look at the first part of it, it starts B, expansion of existing commercial buildings. Do you have that in front of you, Dave?
Under B, you're talking...
Yep.
Yep.
It starts off then you have the 5 bullet points.
Yep.
6, parking to be provided, 5.1.
Yep.
Gets repeated underneath the housing set-aside density bonus. So
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
that need to be in there? Was it a mistake, or?
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
I mean, it could be removed, but it's making it clear.
Fair enough, fair enough.
It's up to the board.
Is there any further discussion of the language used by Commissioner Hirsch regarding minimum 15% in that, starting off the development paragraph? Do we need to have further discussion regarding that?
So just to be clear, the language we approved earlier applies to this paragraph as well.
It could if we go from the 65 to 50. That would be the difference, but the motion would still have to be made by somebody indicating a minimum of 15% and maximum building height of whatever number they come up with.
Mr. Chair, this is a little different because B addresses buildings already in existence. So we don't necessarily have to mirror what was done in Section A because these are buildings, again, that are already in existence. For either way, because these are existing commercial buildings, would 830G even apply because of the commercial element to them?
Go through me to Mr. Lopez, I'm sorry.
The fact that there's commercial doesn't negate an 830G development of housing. So again, they could develop housing on those existing buildings in accordance with the first part of B. And the fact that, again, we're looking at the carrots. This is dealing with the carrot section. So we're trying to get affordable housing. This section would give them a density, a height of 65 feet as the carrot. And that's really the only carrot they would have because if these are existing buildings on Route 1, a lot of them are existing, they're built out to the line. That's why this section also talks about going up vertically. So they, by you allowing them that a carrot to go up higher, in exchange for 830G, you can have the 830G. The fact that the first floor is commercial doesn't affect the 830G one way or the other. What will affect any kind of housing, whether it's 830G or a market rate, is the ability to provide the parking for whatever units they're looking to put in place.
So is there any further discussion on the two areas? 15% is what is in a document prepared by Mr. Sulkus today. That is the 50% of proposed units for affordable housing and a maximum building height of 65 feet. We have had different numbers, 50, 60, 65. Do we need further discussion on this? Sure, John.
I would go to 50 feet on this as well for consistency.
Okay, and does other people have an objection to that height at this point? I mean, this is just for circulation. We may determine at the end of the full hearing that we're going to have different numbers. Ethan, go ahead, please.
I think because you're going to have a first floor commercial, I think 50 feet of residential with 15 feet commercial to 65 seems reasonable to me. Again, the commercial element changes my analysis.
Any other thoughts or comments? John Agnes, sorry, Brian?
Just that for consistency's sake, that the percentage be minimum 15%.
Do you have any comments on the height, Brian?
I'm comfortable with the incentive of 65 feet.
Okay. John Agnes, you have something else you want to say or help us out?
As a compromise, the 65 feet was previously based on a 60-foot height for the previous one. So if we want to be consistent from that point of view, considering the additional height required by commercial, 55 feet I propose.
That's reasonable.
Okay. I'm a little bit confused now. If I could, 55 feet is the total. Okay, and David, you explained why 65 feet was necessary when it's a commercial building there already?
It wasn't necessary. It's again, you want to attract the 830G units, you have to have a carrot. So the fact that earlier in this regulation, the difference between what's allowed now, which is 40 feet, and giving them a carrot of 10 feet, which is basically just one extra floor, we'll see if it's a big enough carrot. And hopefully that with the building coverage, which is the other carrot, will work. We'll probably, if we have any luck with it, it will work on Naugatuck Avenue versus on existing commercial buildings, which, they're not going to have any ability to have a building coverage bonus. They can only go up. And then they're going to be hampered by the ability to provide parking. So if you want to go with 55, that's fine.
Thank you. So if I just might, in listening to, go ahead, Ethan.
May I ask Mr. Sulkus a question?
Of course you can.
Mr. Sulkus, then, would you recommend a lower building coverage than 80% then if you're going to go up to 55 feet?
No, because you need the carrot. The whole point of this is the carrot. And if you're not going up, you got to go wide. Again, Route 1, Bridgeport Avenue, is a different animal in a lot of its parts compared to Naugatuck. You can't go wide, that you're there. So you can only go up. So the incentive is, how high can you go up? And even if you gave them, you know, a 70-foot height, and I'm not recommending that, the challenge is going to be, no matter what, can they provide the parking? Because the board made it clear that every unit that goes in has to have a parking spot. And I think that's going to be the sticking point, you know, unless there's a large enough property on Route 1 to be redeveloped that, you know, happens to be able to provide some parking.
Like the former Flyer.
Well, that's your example of, yeah, I mean, and they're providing one parking per unit on, I think almost, is it almost 2 acres? Is it almost? It's not 2 acres.
It's not 2 acres,
Yeah, it's
no.
not, no, but it's tall, and yeah, and it has parking underneath, so actually the entire site is available, you know, for parking, more or less, other than the foundation.
Yeah, so maybe we do need 80% maximum building coverage for that. 80%.
Yeah, I mean, I think, isn't that, that's what's, yeah.
Yeah, 80%.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
So, can we do this by agreement?
In this zone, we would then, if I may, maximum building coverage we have is existing, because we're assuming existing buildings. We could say maximum building coverage existing, or 80%.
Okay, so, can we do this by agreement? Do we need to go by a motion? The agreement would be that we would have the language of, say, 830G in the amount of minimum 15%, maximum building height of 55 feet, and then, David, the 80% would show up as one of the bullets underneath, like the one with parking?
Yeah, I think what I would do is I would do maximum building coverage existing, or 80%, whichever is larger.
And do we have?
I'm just going to do 80%. I think we're okay with 80%.
Well, what do you do with a building that's existing and is 100%? Because that's what we have.
We do have those?
Yeah, we do have those. Yeah, that's, you know, it's an old downtown. You know, Devon Center is basically a second downtown where you have zero lot line, you know, building. So you have lots that they're 100% covered. That's why existing. And again, you know, if the building's not existing, then you'd go to a different section of the regulations, actually, because this section of the regulations is just for existing commercial. If it's not existing, then you'd be going to the 80% section, which was earlier, which is actually the first section, which talks about building new. So your 80% is covered there.
So we have an agreement on this, that the language that David be using is in the amount of a minimum of 15% proposed units that are affordable. I added the affordable. Maximum height, 65 feet. Sorry, 55 feet. And then the 80% of building coverage, or we don't need that, David.
We're just to keep existing, because this section only relates to existing buildings.
Thank you, members of the board. Now we get to subparagraph capital C, conversion of existing commercial buildings to all residential not located on Bridgeport Avenue, which means we're basically Naugatuck Avenue, right, David?
Sorry about that. I was typing in the language in real time. What was the question?
We're at subparagraph C.
Okay.
And it says for all buildings not located on Bridgeport Avenue, which means we're talking about Naugatuck Avenue.
Yeah, we're talking about Naugatuck there. The CDD2 does have some streets toward the water that are not Naugatuck Avenue, that are other. It's unusual as a corridor district. It does have a few blocks there that have some other names, so that's why I'm just saying not Bridgeport Avenue.
That's why I asked the question. Now that you made the answer, it's pretty easy to understand. So we get down on that, members of the board, we have a bunch of bullet points First one is residential uses that goes down to 100 square feet of outdoor area, multiplied by the numbers. Those appear to be what we've discussed, but I know that Brian Anderson, you had some question about that. Is that something you need to talk about at this point in the proceedings?
Yeah, I'm sorry I offered it earlier before we were ready for it. I apologize for that. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that section because that's important from the standpoint of thinking of incentives and the way in which this area could develop with additional greenery that's available. I'd be interested in hearing the opinions of the public once it goes to public hearing on that matter.
Fair enough, but we're all in agreement that this is, as written by Mr. Sulkus in the revision today, this is something that should go without any changes. Again, Mr. Mortimer, you
I agree.
okay. So now we get down to housing set-aside density bonus for conversion of existing commercial buildings not located on Route 1. David, I just go back to, do we have to be consistent with the language above? It says on Bridgeport, not on located on Bridgeport Avenue, or this is sufficient for not located on Route 1?
Yeah, I mean, if you're concerned about the height on Naugatuck Avenue, which you were in the earlier section under, a different building scenario, then it would be good to be, consistent with the 50 feet. I'd ask you at this point, since we're doing this, whether or not you want to, since the difference is 10 feet between the current regulations and what's being proposed, whether or not you want to have I had this 20-foot setback, again, for taller buildings from the residential zone. If not, we would have the same setbacks that we currently have in the zone because we didn't alter any of the setbacks in any of this. It's what's actually existing in the zone presently.
Yeah, David, and I really appreciate the answer. I guess that I'm probably being more technical. The first paragraph of sub C says, not located on Bridgeport Avenue, indicate there's some of the properties that are not on Naugatuck Avenue that still could be in the CDD2. Should we be consistent with the language of not located on Bridgeport Avenue also at this section, which is housing density bonus for conversion of existing commercial buildings?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It should be consistent. It should say either Bridgeport Avenue or Route 1. And yeah, that should be, you're right.
Okay,
I missed that, yeah.
One of the things we did that. So then we get down to, if we'll have it, the housing set-aside density bonus that David did talk about has a maximum of 60 feet and is proposed, and the 15%. I know that we came up with a different number, and I will turn to Mr. Mortimer or Mr. Agney. What was the number we went up with that one? Was it 50 feet?
It was 50.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I got 60 feet.
55 for the existing commercial buildings.
So would we agree that a developer provides affordable housing in the amount of minimum 15%? That would be sent for circulation, and the maximum building height would be 55 feet.
Yeah, 55 because this is for commercial.
Yeah, I don't,
Okay.
That's what we have done in the previous one. Is this agreeable to be sent for circulation by everybody?
Could I ask?
Obviously, we have to change the language 45 and 60 to 45.
Yeah, I have to, that's something, again, that's begging the question. I mean, I have to obviously take that out because we're dealing with different heights, and it comes back to having the 20-foot setbacks. I would recommend just removing that language. That language was put in there specifically for having taller buildings. We don't want to, we should go with the setbacks that the zone currently allows and which are incorporated in these regulations, because adding, in my opinion, adding that 20-foot setback isn't going to help in promoting and someone taking advantage of the set aside, because that's going to take off the table of potentially a lot of land, even though you've got a maximum building coverage of 80%. So that would be just my suggestion.
Thank you very much. We're getting towards the end of this. Thank you. We then go to 3.
Brian.
Go ahead, Brian.
Let me just pose a question that I'd really love to hear your responses to, and that is, knowing the area, there are side streets running off of Naugatuck Avenue that are very narrow. Some are one-ways. There are single-level garages that have used car sales and that provide automotive repair. There's a daycare facility that's on a side street. Those would be considered commercial, correct? So theoretically, could we have somebody coming in to replace a single-story garage with something that is ultimately 60, 65 feet?
Is that a question to me?
I can answer
Well,
that.
I'm throwing it out.
The board.
Okay, so under the regulations as proposed, there's a difference between new construction and conversion of something that's existing.
Thank you, Brian. I didn't need to make any more answers tonight, but go ahead, Mr. Hirsch.
So, Mr. Salkis, the issue of the setbacks, because we're talking about a conversion, if we are too punitive with the setbacks, we're going to prevent development or conversions of some of these properties. I think we have to be very flexible on these setback rules.
Actually, in hearing you just say what you said, I realize this is actually defective, because if we're converting an existing building, we can't change the setbacks. So, but I'll take that language out. I mean, we can't. You can't move the building. You're either going to take it down and start fresh, or
Yeah, a setback's a setback.
a setback's a setback.
Yeah.
Yep, right.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I had another point. Just regarding the point raised by Mr. Anderson, is this could we potentially see like conversions of these single-story garages on side streets into 55-foot tall buildings as a result of this language? No? Why would that be prevented?
That's not conversion. That's essentially either new construction or adding on. That's not.
Well,
It's not conversion.
if you maintain the building footprint and I'm not sure what our specific rules are, but if they were to maintain a certain percentage of the original building, could they not vertically expand it?
The intent here is, if you have an existing commercial building, you can go up, because it's an existing commercial building, on what's there, the building that's there. Also, because it's off of Route 1 or Bridgeport Avenue, depending on the size of the property, like any building in the city, if you have extra land and you want to add on to something, you could, as long as it's in conformance or compliance with our regulations in terms of setbacks.
So potentially you could have a single-story garage on a side street right now that's going to end up 55 feet tall.
But potentially, depending on the size of the property, and I mean,
I think that's a problem.
So if I just might.
I also think that's very unlikely. That would not be economically. I don't believe that would be economically viable for a builder to do such a thing.
yeah, I mean, usually when a lot of these things happen, a lot of buildings, especially one-story buildings, unless they were engineered really from the beginning, you're gonna, and especially a site that's a garage, you're gonna have environmental issues you're gonna have to deal with. I would assume, which is always bad, but I would think that they'd be starting from scratch versus trying to use what's there and be able to clean what's there and dig out. And, we are aware of these issues with automotive uses that ultimately they've got a lot of issues they have to deal with. terms of changing their development. And we see that around town with garages that are closed, and they're not, especially ones that are in prime locations like in downtown that are sitting there because of those types of issues.
All the same, understood, totally get it, but all the same,
Oh, I agree.
I would like to hedge our language just to prevent that, just in case. Like we said, we're making assumptions here, and you know what they say about that.
So, Mr. Agnese, you want to have a carve-out for automotive uses? That you cannot convert automotive uses in this corridor and CDD2 zone?
Maybe not specifically automotive uses. I was thinking more along the lines of maybe these side streets in particular, like Naugatuck Ave is Naugatuck Ave, but the side street running off of it is not really what we're trying to target here, I don't think, are we?
Yeah, if you know some locations on the side streets, or just give me the side streets, I can try to craft some language. Yeah, because I would hate to limit that on Naugatuck Avenue, because we have a lot of uses on Naugatuck
Exactly.
Avenue.
Yeah, I think we ought to have a bit of precision here, because I think on one hand there's danger of unintended consequences here. I think we really want to avoid that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
Could we change the language from not located on Route 1 to located on Naugatuck Avenue?
We could, yes.
I mean, we could do that, but I mean,
Yeah.
that just accomplish our goal?
But at the same time, then we'd have to carve out something which we can do. I'd have to see how many of the other parts of the zone are not on either one of those two streets. So it may be just easier to do a carve out, very specific use carve out for the other streets versus, the zone. So we just need to, John, let me know what the locations are. Yeah, if you can identify the locations, that way I can, come up with something to deal with the streets. I'll figure something out to have that protection.
So if I might, I guess I am required to speak up. Brian had a question, and my memory going down Naugatuck Avenue, where there are some auto businesses, are often corner lots. So they have frontage on Naugatuck Avenue, and they might have some frontage on a side street. I'm not aware of any automobile businesses that will be down the side street, not frontaging on Naugatuck Avenue. So there's a gas station corner of Naugatuck, Milford Point Road. We start getting down, there's a couple of buildings that are involved in automotive activities, some of which look like are going to be closing up. One was apparently a junkyard. Again, that's just by memory. So I don't think it's a major issue of a auto business completely down the side street. That's based on my memory, but the second thing is we do have the maps that were sent to us previously. We can look at those. Any event, if we could just try to finish up the last bit of this. These are all good points, and if you have a concern, talk to David. We'll get there. We have on the document that came from David, start for something 317 1.11, sale of alcohol liquor. And then we go down through the remaining of the document. The only thing I noted, David, 317.2, the font should all be similar. Whatever came from you had a super different font, nothing major. And then you changed a lot of the things that dealt with multifamily residential buildings that are in the CDD2. This is 317.24. You took those out. And again, I don't mean to go too quickly, but there's changes that we had to make based on the state statutes. But does anybody, for the remaining portion, see anything that needs to be changed other than some, font issues on the remaining portion of what we're looking at?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Bryan?
I wondered, Mr. Sulkus, what the origin was of 3.17.2.21, planned elderly community for persons 55 years of age or older. How did that come about?
That was effective to 21, because we allowed it. It's an allowable use in all of the R zones, all the residential zones. So the thinking was this, being a corridor district, but also, heavily residential in nature and hopefully more so in the future, having that use allowed there.
So was this in response to a state mandate,
No.
the housing plan, or what's the origin?
The origin is that we allow it in all the R zones, and the board at the time thought it would be good to allow it in this particular zone as well.
I see, so it wasn't tied to a particular project?
No, because as far as I know, we don't have one in this zone.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We'll give everybody a chance to read, but we then go to 317.3, 317.4. Those look like things that we were provided both in the regulations subcommittee and also in the general meeting, we didn't have any suggestions from staff that anything needed to be changed absent multifamily buildings and 30% of the units, which were in 317.24. That was taken out. And then we have no tracking, some of these things, ending in taverns shall be prohibited.
Yeah, we don't permit taverns. We don't, I'm not even sure the state issues tavern permits anymore. So, and a tavern, for those who don't know, is basically a place you go to drink. It has no food. It has no requirements for food. You just go and drink. So that's the difference. And not to be confused with a cafe where you can have other things. We want cafes. And any tavern that may be existing is grandfathered, and they're fine.
So do we have any other questions, or this can go to circulation through David with a copy to all board members? Once you've provided this, I know that you normally don't send out until it comes back what the proposed regulation is, but I think maybe that might be better if we do it, because we do have some members who are not here tonight, David.
Yeah, what I want to do is I want to take everything that was said tonight, obviously make the changes, get it out to the board to review. If there's a meeting on the 1st, and at this point I'm not sure we have anything even ready on the agenda for the 1st, but get it out to you so you'll have it, review it, and then at the next meeting, if you're satisfied with it up to that point in time, and the other members who aren't here have had a chance to look at it, give me the okay at that point to send it up for circulation.
Thank you very much, and you can turn to the chair. Now, that being said, I want to recognize those members of the community that have been sitting here listening to our comments. We appreciate you being here. I know you've been here previously at different hearings, but hopefully we're going to get to the point where we have a public hearing. And we welcome your input at an appropriate time, and that's when we expect to hear it. So we really have no other business. You're welcome to stay as long as you wish. We're not going to be here too much longer. Yes, Eton.
Mr. Chair, why can't we vote on B tonight? C, I understand, because we got setback issues and other matters with automotive. But why can't we vote on B, the expansion of existing commercial buildings? We have 6 people here. We have a general consensus.
Let me get back to, Eton, let me get back to where you're talking about. Give me a second.
Yeah, the expansion of existing buildings. Why can't we vote on that?
I thought that we, after further discussion, decided that language, we would change it to more than 50, minimum 15%, maximum building height of 55. We agreed by.
But there was no motion.
I agree. We've been working by assent now.
Okay. All right. I thought we needed a motion. Okay.
I didn't ask for a motion. I appreciate the help, but next time ready for a motion, get your hand up, because there's going to be a lot of people getting in line in front of you. Thank you. So, liaison reports. I'm glad to report that I had a meeting last week. Nothing involved City of Milford. It was a pleasant time. It was done by Zoom. Subcommittee report, there is none at this point. Approval of minutes. Mr. Hirsch, I understand you want to make a motion concerning those?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Any second?
Second.
Okay, any objection to that? Wonderful. Hearing none. Chair's report. He's not here to give it, so thank you very much. You wait for the next report from the chair. Staff report. David, and we didn't talk about this with Jim, but education.
So, a great education opportunity, of course, is coming up Saturday. Some of you have signed up for the Bar Association's one-day legal education. Enjoy it. It should take care of a lot of, if not all of your credits. And again, we'll forward to you other opportunities for you to get more education. A lot of it is actually available online from Yukon Clear, and for live events. When we find out about them, we always pass them on, and you're always encouraged to take advantage of them. And we will reimburse you if it's something that you have to pay for.
Thank you. Any other part of your staff report?
Yes, there was something I was going to tell you, and now I don't. I had a meeting with the developers of Wheelers Farms Road. The makeup of the project development team has changed. The project, it will be moving forward, and between now and the fall, they're going to be developing their plans, and I think what's going to happen over time is you're going to see progress, basically progress prints as they develop things, just for your own information, that would ultimately culminate, in the board's meeting to, review their approval of the final development plan per the regulations that you approved for that floating zone back in July.
Thank you. And just two things have come up of note. Articles about different projects, one including the mall. Is there any further report on the mall's approach for 750 units for housing? There was an article in the paper. They haven't talked to me directly, so all I know is what was reported in the paper in a meeting at the mayor's office. I think that you're going to see something, and we'll see if it's what everyone says it is, or if it's something different, or something that what you expect with something added that was unexpected. That's all I can say, because I don't know. I'm glad you don't tell us what you don't know. Thank you. And the other thing is anything about the Kmart Plaza, which we approved a couple of years ago? Yes, as a matter of fact. Talking to the developer who got the approvals and was going to buy the property, what has occurred is the following. The day of the closing, there was an issue that was supposed to have been buttoned up, which is, it's either, there's two discount stores in the plaza, and I don't remember the names, if it's Dollar General or one of the, an Odd Job. Well, in the lease for one of those stores, the lease says that the leasee has a right and control of what occurs on the site that would include the entire parking lot that's there. So the property owners, who are the current property owners, could not come to terms with them. So
what would have been the new property owners to develop and redo the plaza could not close on the project. Therefore, it's not gonna happen anytime soon. Dollar General, I was told, has at least several more years on their lease, and that doesn't include their right to renew. So unless the current property owners do something with them, they're basically holding the project hostage. So the original developers have not closed and they've walked away. That's not to say that if something isn't worked out in the future, they wouldn't go back, but this is what I had been told.
Thank you, and just to clear up the record, it's the Ocean State Job Lot. I thought you said at one point, odd job, we're not dealing with Bond movies tonight.
Yeah, no Bond movies.
Thank you. So we've got a motion to adjourn by Mr. Anderson. Anybody want to second it?
I will second.
There'll be a second. Thank you. And David, you said we'll see you in, what, 4 weeks?
Yes, I will not be here. Obviously, you'll see me at the meeting on the 15th.
It's something we look forward to. Amazingly, can't wait to see you back. Bye.
I'll bring my slide projector and show you my slides. And people are looking around like, what's a slide projector? Boy, I'm getting old.
I move we head to a tavern.